I grew up in a house without a television. I grew up in a house without a car or a phone, but a lot of rain and a lot of thunder. And my mum and dad regarded language as wealth. They regarded it as wealth. So actually, if we ever came into any money and the option was, well, we could possibly get a second-hand car, or we could get more books, or we could get more records, we got the books, we got the records. I would take that into taverns, garages, working in factories. I've worked a lot, that kind of thing. There was no expectation of what I would do with my life. I was loved, but there was no sense of anything particularly startling coming down the chute. But actually, as I got older and I went through heartbreak and divorce and depression and illness like everyone does, suddenly the stories that I remembered as a kid were not just simple little fairy tales anymore. They were an amazing way of thinking deeply through images. Myth is a form of thinking. And actually, as someone that spent a lot of time living outdoors, I came to understand through 4 years in the forest that the earth actually thinks in myth. So if you're not conversant with myth, your ear is out of tune. Seamus Heaney, the great Irish poet, would say, your ear needs to be tuned. If when you hear a myth, you keep and only relate it to men and women and gender issues and political and historic events, then it's not really having its way with you. Because a lot of the time, myth, I have to tell you, is referring to what William Blake calls divine influxes. In other words, inside you are all the characters within a myth, and outside too. But there's some place that if you keep exteriorizing the story, you end up saying, well, that's barbaric, he cut someone's head off. And you're saying, no, we're really talking about a moment in your life that has severance in it. So there's a little bit of education around, I would say, how to hear a myth deeply. Yeah. What Jung used to call the lament of the dead, which is really the lament of the ancestors, starts to come not just into your language, but in your presence. Your presence. I had a relationship, a very short friendship, but it was powerful for me, with a man called Wallace Black Elk, an old shaman, Lakota shaman. And people said, do you know why Wallace has so much respect when he walks into the powwow? And I said, no. And they said, because everybody in the village knows he has died over and over and over and over again for us. Because that is a man that would go up in South Dakota onto the cliff in his 70s, with nothing but a blanket and a pipe, no food, no water, and he'd pray for 4 days. That's how we used to be made. That's how you make a human being. There's a car does not make you an adult. A phone does not make you an adult. The problem with the screens is that we are no longer so aware of all those trembling energies at the edge of our vision. But you go to any hunter-gatherer culture and the action is always on the edge. When a culture is in crisis, any form of antidote does not come from the center, it comes from the edge. But we are caught in a kind of form of hypnosis. We can't actually see what is at the very trembling edge of our vision, which is trying to prod us into a deeper life. So in a way, if we are continually gazing about half a foot ahead of us, in some reflection, we are like Narcissus gazing at the pool, always looking at ourselves, caught in our own rhapsody, while the world goes to hell in a handbag. There are old native stories of sorcerers who, when they really want to become powerful, they consciously bury their heart so they can't have access to it. They bury their heart. And when I'm around people of depth, what we in England used to call men of high degree or women of high degree, they say culturally we have buried our heart under a tree and we can no longer find it. And that is a terrible thing. And myth is a way you sing into that darkness to try and find the buried heart. An old Aboriginal idea called wildland dreaming. And that actually, when an Aboriginal teacher looks at modernity, when they look at us in the West, do you know what they say? They say, your society is only 3 days deep. And you say, what the hell does that mean? What it means is 3 days out in the bush, all of this paraphernalia you have put on you gets cracked open, 3 days deep. On the 4th day, there is the possibility you can move into a moment where you don't dream anymore. There's no ambition left. There's no hubris left. There's not much ego left. And it's in that sweet spot that you may get dreamt by the land itself. And that was the moment that myths used to move into the songlines of human beings. That was the moment. And so as a storyteller, you are waiting to be broken open by the forces before you say a damn thing. Otherwise, in a culture worth its salt, the old ones look at you and they say, I don't believe a word of you. Myth is a wild way of telling the truth. It's a wild way of telling the truth. Facts are a poor substitute for truth-telling. You know? That's what story is. That's what myth is. Little pinpricks of eternity. So a moment in your life you may have never paid any attention to, you suddenly go, God damn it, that just happened in that Russian fairy tale. So myth is something that's alive. It's not really even to do with a long time ago. We say a long time ago just to propel you out of 2018. But actually we're dealing with another type of time altogether. And usually when folks have been working with me, their first reaction when they come out is usually strong emotion, but not a great deal of clarity yet about what has just happened. They've just had a kind of stand and deliver moment. And they've lost all their jewelry, but they've never felt so alive. I like that. I like that, man. Yeah.
I was in Australia teaching a 8-week program for people that had 6 Aborigine people in this program. And I never encountered a culture more different from my own than I encountered in this Australian Aborigine. I mean, they were isolated for thousands of years without any agriculture, without any civilization at all, just tribal life, over 12 or 15 or 20,000 years old and older, you see. And this culture just mystified me. But these people participated in the course. I didn't know what they were saying about half the time, but when I caught on what they were saying, they were telling me a story that was a better answer to the question I asked for grounding than some of my white Australian friends, you know, who were more rational, but just didn't have that mystical something or other that the Aborigine members of this course had. And one morning, I'd given a lecture on the land of mystery. And after that lecture, this tall, thin Aborigine man, as black as that statue, comes up to me and says to me this line, which I have never forgotten. When you talk like that, I hear you in my own stories. My own stories. I don't know what the hell his stories were. I probably wouldn't have understood them if he just told me. But he recognized that what I was talking about, he was talking about with his stories, and that we were members of the same humanity. That's what I mean. These cultural barriers are very real, very difficult to overcome, but they are overcomable. We are a same species. We have the same bodily, mental, physical, spiritual essentials, and we can communicate with each other if it's done well enough. So that's a to me, a living story that holds my view intact that behind all our differences, we are one humanity. And that's what I mean by profound humanness.
I am beginning to grasp that I am the stories by which I see and experience the world around me. An awareness of myth is guiding me out of my head and my thoughts about life and into my actual experience of life. I am ready to evolve my personal story in dialogue with the ultimate story. Please join me in this deep place.